I never thought a simple girl's trip would turn into the worst day of my life, until I walked into my own living room and saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I had spent the weekend with my best friend Sophie, laughing, relaxing, and escaping from the usual chaos of life. I decided to come home a day earlier than planned, excited to surprise my husband, Ryan. I imagined his face lighting up, a warm hug, maybe even a quiet dinner together. But the moment I turned the key and stepped inside, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet, almost eerily so. Ryan's car was in the driveway, just as I expected, but there was no sound of music, no laughter, no "I'm home" to welcome me. My stomach tightened as I called out his name, and the silence that answered made my heart sink. As I walked through the hallway, I noticed little things that didn't make sense. A door was slightly ajar, and there was a faint, unfamiliar scent in the air. I paused, trying to convince myself it was nothing, that maybe he was just busy with work or on a phone call. But a nagging feeling wouldn't let me shake the unease. I headed toward the bedroom, each step heavier than the last. That's when I saw them. Ryan, the man I had trusted with my heart, was there, in a way I never imagined, with another woman. Her name was Jessica, someone I barely knew, a coworker he had mentioned once. My chest tightened, my mind went blank, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run away, but I was frozen in shock. Ryan turned around, his face a mix of guilt and surprise, as if I had caught him in some small misdeed rather than the betrayal of our marriage. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Anger, hurt, and disbelief churned inside me all at once. I left the house before I could say anything more, needing air, needing space to think. Sophie listened as I recounted everything, and though I felt humiliated, she reminded me to stay calm and think carefully. I decided I wouldn't act out of anger. Instead, I quietly gathered proof of Ryan's affair, messages, emails, receipts, every detail he would not expect me to notice. I planned to confront him with the truth in a way that left no room for excuses. When the day came, I laid out all the evidence. Ryan's face fell, realizing that I had seen everything, and for the first time, he understood that I was no longer the naive wife who would forgive blindly. I ended the marriage calmly, reclaiming my life. Months later, I've rebuilt myself, focusing on my passions and happiness. The betrayal still stings, but I've grown stronger, wiser, and free. My revenge wasn't about hurting Ryan. It was about finding my own peace and taking control of my life. The moment I stepped inside, an uneasy stillness wrapped around the house. Everything felt different, too empty, almost like the life had been drained out of it. Ryan's car sat in the driveway, and yet there was no sound of him moving around, no footsteps, no voice calling out a welcome. I dropped my bags by the door, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my chest. As I moved further into the living room, I noticed the tiniest things that seemed off. A cushion slightly out of place, a photo frame tilted, and a faint, unfamiliar smell lingering. My stomach churned, and I whispered his name, hoping for an answer, but only silence met me. Every corner I looked at made my heart beat faster. A door near the hallway wasn't fully closed, swinging just slightly with the draft. I approached it cautiously, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. The scent of something I didn't recognize was stronger here, subtle but sharp, making my throat tighten. It wasn't right. Something had changed in my absence, something I hadn't been prepared for. I called out again, louder this time, my voice echoing through the empty space, hoping he would answer, hoping it was nothing serious. But the silence stayed, heavy and unyielding. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all, searching for a logical explanation. Maybe he had gone out last minute, maybe a friend had dropped by, or perhaps he was just in another room, lost in work. I tried to calm myself, but the quiet seemed too deliberate, too unnatural, and a cold fear began to creep in. Each step I took toward the bedroom was measured, careful, my heart thudding painfully against my ribs. The sense of foreboding was unbearable now, every small detail whispering that something wasn't right, that the warm welcome I had imagined wasn't coming at all. I stood there for a long moment, frozen in the middle of the hallway, listening for any sign of him, any normal noise that would tell me everything was okay. But the house held its secrets tightly, offering nothing but the eerie stillness and the unsettling hints that something had shifted in my absence. Each small detail, the ajar door, the strange smell, the silence, built a knot of dread in my chest. My fingers tightened around the doorknob as I steeled myself, sensing that what awaited me was nothing I could have anticipated, a truth that would shatter the calm I had carried from my weekend. I pushed the bedroom door open, and the scene before me made my knees weaken. Ryan was there, not alone, but with Jessica, someone I had only met a few times at dinner parties and work events. The sight felt unreal, like a cruel dream I couldn't wake from. My hands trembled, my chest tightened, and my mind raced, trying to grasp what my eyes refused to believe. I wanted to turn and run, to erase the image from memory, but my feet remained planted, unable to move. Ryan froze immediately, his face pale, eyes wide, fumbling for words that didn't come. Jessica glanced at me, panic flashing across her face, but she didn't speak either. The room seemed to shrink around me, every heartbeat echoing loudly in my trust, my years of believing in him, shattered in that single, unbearable moment. I felt a rush of anger, humiliation, and sorrow mixed together, a storm I could not control. I struggled to form a question, to demand an explanation, but my voice faltered. How could he do this? How could he betray everything we had built, the vows we had promised each other, the life we had shared? Ryan's attempt to justify himself sounded hollow and weak, a feeble defense against the devastation he had caused. My heart broke in a way I hadn't imagined possible, every memory of love and laughter twisting into betrayal. I wanted answers, yet the sight of them together made it almost impossible to think clearly. I felt trapped in a nightmare, where the person I trusted most had turned into a stranger before my eyes. The warmth and security of our home evaporated instantly, replaced by disbelief and a deep, gnawing pain that cut through me. In that moment, I realized nothing would ever feel the same, and the life I had thought I knew was irreversibly fractured. Every detail, the way he looked at her, the careless intimacy, the ease between them, punched through me like a physical blow. My chest ached, my vision blurred, and for a long, suspended second, I simply stood there, frozen, trying to reconcile the man I loved with the one who had betrayed me so completely. The room felt suffocating, and the world outside seemed distant and unreal. All I could feel was the raw, overwhelming ache of betrayal, a wound that would not heal easily, leaving me stunned, hollow, and fiercely aware that nothing could ever be the same again. My legs carried me to him, though my mind screamed at me to turn away. Standing there, I forced myself to meet his eyes, searching for the man I thought I knew, the one who had promised loyalty and my voice cracked as I demanded answers, each word trembling between fury and heartbreak. The room pulsed with tension, the air thick with unsaid words and the weight of what had just happened. Ryan opened his mouth, fumbling for excuses, claiming it was just a moment of weakness. A mistake he said he regretted. His words felt empty, hollow, as if saying them could erase the reality before. Every syllable deepened the wound in my chest, igniting a fire of anger I hadn't anticipated. My hands shook, my throat tightened, and tears pricked the corners of my eyes. I couldn't understand how he could minimize what he had done, act as though a single word could undo months of betrayal. Humiliation washed over me like a cold wave. The love I had poured into our marriage, the trust one had built, seemed to crumble in an instant. Rage bubbled up, fierce and consuming, mingling with the ache of betrayal and the shock of seeing someone I cared for disregard everything we had shared. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to let him feel even a fraction of the torment he had caused, but I restrained myself. Instead, I turned on my heel, my body shaking as I left the house. The cool air outside hit my face, a sharp contrast to the suffocating tension inside, and I walked without looking back. Each step was both painful and liberating, a mix of sorrow and defiance coursing through me. Ryan's voice called after me, uncertain, guilt evident in the way he faltered, but I didn't respond. The only thing I could focus on was clearing my mind, letting the storm inside me settle enough to think clearly. As I wandered, I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on every thought. Rage, sorrow, and humiliation tangled together, making it hard to breathe, hard to imagine moving forward. Yet beneath the hurt, a spark of clarity began to grow. I realized I couldn't let this destroy me, couldn't allow him to control my pain. The confrontation had left me shaken, but it had also ignited a determination I hadn't known I possessed. I knew I needed space, time to reclaim my sense of self, and the courage to face what came next, even if it meant leaving behind the person I had once loved. I met Sophie at our favorite cafe, the one tucked away on a quiet street where we had spent countless afternoons laughing and venting. The moment I sat down, I felt the weight of everything I had witnessed spill out of me. I told her every detail, the look on Ryan's face, the closeness with Jessica, and the unbearable sense of betrayal. My hands shook as I spoke, and tears slipped silently down my cheeks. Sophie reached across the table, gripping my hands, and didn't let me stop crying. She listened without judgment, letting me unravel every raw thought and emotion. When I finally took a shaky breath, she looked at me with steady eyes and said, "You can't let anger make your decisions for you. You have to be smart. Take your time and think about what comes next." Her words cut through the fog of pain, grounding me just enough to see a path forward. She reminded me that revenge wasn't about being cruel. It was about reclaiming control and protecting myself from being hurt again. Her advice sparked something in me, a clarity I hadn't felt since walking in. I realized I needed to act with precision, not impulse. I began thinking through every step carefully, imagining ways to ensure Ryan couldn't hide behind lies or excuses. My plan wasn't born from spite. It was born from the need to restore my sense of self-worth and to show him that betrayal carries consequence. As we talked, Sophie encouraged me to document everything, to pay attention to small details Ryan might think are insignificant. She reminded me that knowledge is power, and that patience would serve me better than confrontation fueled by raw emotion. For the first time since that terrible day, I felt a flicker of purpose, a sense that I could turn this devastation into something that strengthened me rather than destroyed me. Leaving the cafe, I felt a mixture of determination and cautious anticipation. My mind was already moving through possible scenarios, planning how to handle conversations, how to secure proof, and how to make sure the truth could no longer be hidden. The storm of pain was still inside me, but it had shifted into something more controlled, a quiet, simmering resolve. I knew I couldn't rush, couldn't act recklessly, but every decision I made from now on would be guided by a clear goal, reclaiming my dignity and ensuring Ryan's betrayal was fully exposed. By the time I returned home, my thoughts were organized, my emotions sharper. Sophie's support had reminded me that I wasn't helpless, and that I could navigate this betrayal strategically. The heartbreak remained, but it no longer felt like the end of me. It felt like the beginning of taking back what he had taken from me, my trust, my respect, and my peace. I began moving cautiously, determined to uncover the truth without alerting Ryan. Every action had to be careful, deliberate, and unnoticed. I started by checking small things he thought I never paid attention to: his desk drawers, his briefcase, even his car. Each envelope, note, and forgotten receipt became a potential piece of the puzzle. I photographed documents, saved messages, and copied anything that hinted at deception. Late nights became my time for careful examination. I read through emails and text threads, piecing together patterns, dates, and repeated excuses. Jessica's name appeared more times than I expected, her presence infiltrating the routine of our lives. I took notes of every interaction, every small lie, making sure I could connect the dots without relying on memory. It was methodical work, draining but necessary. I also paid attention to seemingly insignificant details: a restaurant receipt, a coffee cup with initials, timestamps on texts that didn't align with Ryan's story. Each small piece built a bigger picture, and with every discovery, my resolve strengthened. I wasn't doing this to humiliate him in front of others. I was preparing myself to stand firmly, to reclaim the upper hand when the time came. Emily's nights were quiet, filled with silent determination. I created folders, categorized the evidence, and even rehearsed how I would confront him, anticipating excuses and denials. Every piece of proof was another layer of security for myself, ensuring that when the moment arrived, I could speak confidently without hesitation. It was exhausting, both mentally and emotionally, but I kept reminding myself why I was doing it. This wasn't about vengeance born from anger. It was about empowerment, about making sure that the betrayal couldn't be hidden and that I could assert control over my life again. Each item I collected, each message saved, felt like a step toward freedom, toward restoring the respect and dignity he had disregarded. By the end of several days, I had a clear, undeniable collection of evidence. The quiet work of discovery had transformed my fear and hurt into focus and determination. I finally felt ready to face Ryan, not as someone broken by betrayal, but as someone armed with the truth, someone who would no longer be manipulated or deceived. This meticulous preparation gave me strength, and for the first time since that terrible day, I felt the power shifting back into my hand. I called Ryan, keeping my tone calm, almost casual, suggesting we meet to talk about us. He agreed without suspicion, thinking it would be another routine conversation, unaware that I had spent days preparing for this exact moment. We met at a quiet park bench, the kind where no one else would intrude, the air crisp and still. I carried a folder, neatly organized, every page a record of his deception. As soon as we sat down, I placed the folder between us and looked him in the eye. "I think it's time we're completely honest," I said, my voice steady. I watched as his expression shifted from curiosity to unease, sensing for the first time that I had knowledge he couldn't deny. I opened the folder and started going through the documents one by one: messages, receipts, timestamps, emails, all of it carefully laid out so there could be no argument, no twisting of facts. Ryan's lips parted, but no words came. He shifted uncomfortably, the confidence he had carried for weeks fading as the evidence mounted in front of him. Every proof I presented tightened the hold of reality around him, and I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. I wasn't the same woman he had betrayed. I was alert, precise, and in control. I explained calmly what each item meant, how it connected, and why his excuses would no longer hold any weight. My tone carried neither malice nor pleading, only clarity and strength. As I spoke, I could feel the shift in power. The fear in his eyes replaced the arrogance he had shown, and I knew he understood that the situation had changed completely. I had the upper hand, and for the first time since discovering his betrayal, I felt the full measure of my own agency. The moment was electric, charged with a tension that neither of us could ignore. Ryan tried to interject once or twice, but I silenced him gently yet firmly, demonstrating that the conversation would proceed on my terms. His posture slumped, his attempts at denial falling flat against the organized truth I had presented. When I finally closed the folder, there was a heavy silence between us. The park seemed quiet, as if holding its breath along with it. Ryan no longer saw the naive, trusting wife he had taken for granted. Instead, he saw someone who had been hurt, yes, but someone who had risen above that hurt, collected her power, and was ready to act decisively. For the first time, he understood the full extent of the consequences of his choices, and I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that the truth was finally undeniable, fully in my control. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of clarity settle over me. The shock and pain had sharpened into resolve, and I knew it was time to stop letting Ryan dictate my life. I met him again, this time at home, with a quiet determination that surprised even me. I spoke calmly, clearly, stating that the marriage was over. There was no yelling, no pleading, just a firm declaration that I would no longer tolerate lies or disrespect. I outlined the steps I would take if he tried to manipulate the situation or minimize his actions. Legal counsel had been consulted, and I made it clear that any attempt to twist the truth would be met with immediate action. The confidence in my voice left no room for argument. Ryan's face fell as he realized that the control he had once held over me had completely vanished. I didn't stop there. I began making subtle moves to let mutual friends understand the reality without creating a spectacle. Casual mentions of facts, sharing stories that couldn't be denied, and careful hints about inconsistencies in Ryan's behavior allowed the truth to reach others naturally. It was quiet, strategic, and effective. Enough for those who mattered to recognize Jessica's role in the betrayal without me needing to openly attack her. Each conversation I had, each interaction, reinforced my position. I wasn't acting out of spite. I was reclaiming my dignity, showing that deceit could not undermine the respect I had for myself. Watching Ryan's confusion, and realizing that his charm and excuses no longer worked was oddly satisfying. He had underestimated my capacity to respond, to act deliberately rather than impulsively. As the days passed, I maintained composure, refusing to be drawn into arguments or emotional traps. My focus remained on the life I wanted to build, not the one he had tried to control. I carefully navigated mutual circles, ensuring the truth became evident through actions and observation rather than confrontation. The sense of empowerment grew, replacing the anger and hurt with a firm, controlled strength. By the time everything settled, Ryan was left confronting the consequences of his choices, and I had reestablished my sense of self. The marriage ended on my terms, the truth subtly revealed to those around us, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulder. The betrayal no longer had the power to define me. Instead, I had turned the tables completely, transforming the pain he caused into my own victory, quiet yet undeniable, and stepping forward into a life where I held the control. I packed my belongings quietly, making sure every item I took with me represented the life I wanted to reclaim. Leaving the house felt like shedding a heavy weight I had carried for far too long. The familiar walls that once held memories of love and betrayal now became a backdrop I was ready to leave behind. I found a small apartment of my own, a space that reflected me and my independence, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of freedom that was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Starting a new job gave me structure and a renewed sense of purpose. Each morning, I walked into the office with a quiet determination, focusing on tasks and challenges that allowed me to rebuild my confidence. The work kept my mind engaged and my heart steady, reminding me that I could create stability and success for myself, separate from the chaos Ryan had caused. Outside of work, I dedicated time to the things I had once neglected: painting, jogging in the mornings, and even joining a small book club. Each activity was a step toward rediscovering the joy I had let slip away during the months of heartbreak. My social circle expanded carefully, bringing supportive friends and new connections into my life, and I realized that happiness could be rebuilt slowly, brick by brick. Ryan's attempts to reach out came and went, messages filled with regret and empty promises. But I no longer responded, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I no longer belonged in his world. My focus was on myself, on reclaiming the parts of me that had been overshadowed by betrayal. Each day that passed reinforced my independence and reminded me that I could thrive without him. I journaled extensively, pouring my thoughts, fears, and ambitions onto paper. Writing became a way to process the pain, to turn the heartbreak into clarity. I documented lessons learned, my own resilience, and the boundaries I would never allow anyone to cross again. This practice reminded me that my story was mine to write, that I was no longer a passive participant in someone else's choices. Months went by, and I could feel the transformation within me. I was stronger, more self-aware, and more in tune with my desires and limits. Ryan's regret no longer had power over me. It was simply a shadow of a past I had already moved beyond. I smiled at small victories, celebrated personal growth, and looked forward to the future with anticipation rather than fear. The betrayal that once threatened to break me had instead ignited a determination to thrive, proving that even after immense hurt, life could be reclaimed, rebuilt, and reshaped into something vibrant, fulfilling, and wholly mine. Sitting by the window of my apartment, I watched the sun rise over the city and felt a calm I hadn't experienced in a long time. The months since leaving Ryan had passed with challenges, growth, and quiet victories that gradually rebuilt my sense of self. I no longer carried the sharp edges of anger or the heavy weight of betrayal. Instead, a clear understanding had settled in me, a recognition of my strength and resilience. Looking back, the pain no longer felt overwhelming. I could remember the heartbreak, the shock, and the confusion, but they no longer had the power to control my emotions. I realized that the lessons I had learned were far more valuable than the suffering itself. Each difficult moment had shaped me, teaching me boundaries, self-respect, and the importance of trusting my instinct. I spent time nurturing the parts of myself I had neglected, my passions, my friendships, and my career. These were not distractions, but affirmations of who I was and who I could become. Every choice I made reinforced my autonomy and reminded me that my happiness was something I could cultivate intentionally. I learned to celebrate small accomplishments, to find joy in moments that once might have gone unnoticed, and to honor my own worth without needing validation from anyone else. Ryan's presence in my life had faded into the background, a shadow of the past rather than a current reality. His regrets were irrelevant to the life I had built, and I no longer invested energy in imagining his perspective or hoping for acknowledgement. My focus was on myself, on maintaining the clarity and confidence I had fought so hard to achieve. There were times when memories of betrayal surfaced, but they were no longer triggers for pain. Instead, they served as reminders of the journey I had endured and the strength I had discovered. I understood that true revenge had not been in causing him discomfort or embarrassment, but in reclaiming my identity, my dignity, and my peace of mind. In this space of emotional clarity, I felt pride in the way I had handled everything. I had taken control of my narrative, choosing actions that empowered rather than hurt. The scars of betrayal had transformed into markers of resilience, and each day I moved forward with confidence and self-respect. Sitting there, breathing in the morning air, I realized I had fully reclaimed my life. The experience had not broken me, it had refined me. I no longer allowed anyone to diminish me, manipulate me, or disrespect me. I had healed, I had grown, and I had taken control, not for revenge, but for myself. For the first time in months, I felt whole, proud, and unshakably certain of the life I was building on my own terms. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away, or should I have given Ryan another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell for more real-life stories like mine.